Recording will start soon.
It's recording.
Okay. What's up, man?
What's up, dude? You ready for the inaugural podcast?
I am. Let's do it.
Just pretend that a million people are watching us right now.
We got this. We don't got a name for it or anything. We're just diving in. Let's just go.
Yeah, for sure. What? Thibodeau Morel Group Housing Report?
Yeah, sure. That's original.
I'll start off with an introduction, pass the baton to you after that, and we're going to go over the three main talking points, and we'll go from there. Jason Thibodeau here, branch manager of GMT Financial in Huntington Beach. I've been originating loans since 2004. I have kind of graduated over the last couple decades to managing and leading and mentoring. And to this day, we're still a profitable branch, if you can believe that, in the mortgage industry. So we take a lot of pride in that. So I've got, thousands of transactions under my belt. And I'm always fascinated with what the mainstream media is saying about our industry and housing and finance, what social media influencers are saying. And one thing I know for certain is that there is a ton of just bad and just wrong information out there. And so Matt and I have been inspired to start this podcast just to, we're advisors to our clients. We'd like to bring that information also to the marketplace in the podcast form. And so that's the purpose of this. And we're going to be talking about things like, is there a housing bubble? What are interest rates doing? And where are they going? There's some other products that I think are super relevant right now for borrowers to be aware of that they might not be aware of. So those are the kinds of things we're going to dive into. And that's who I am. Who are you, Matt?
Yeah, great intro, Jay. So I'm Matt Morel, branch manager of our Meridian, Idaho office location. I have been originating loans for coming up on a decade now. And prior to that, I was a financial advisor for about 5 years. So I'm 15 years plus in financial services. Come from a household with a mother that was a teacher. And so my approach in my career has always been, and with my financial advisor background, my approach has always been more educational as opposed to salesy or anything like that, which unfortunately our industry just has a lot of that type of approach. So I've just taken a really different approach, attempted to educate my clients, always do what's right by them. And sometimes that means referring deals to other people that can better serve them. So a little bit about me. I reside in Boise, Idaho now with my wife and child, and love what I do.
Yeah, we live in two very different marketplaces, right? So I'm in Huntington Beach, California, in Orange County. You're in Boise, Idaho area, two wildly different marketplaces. So it's kind of cool because we're going to be able to offer some pretty diversified perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep.
All right, well, that's who we are. What are we going to talk about today? I think the main thing that's kind of on everybody's mind right now is housing prices. It's interesting because the higher interest rates go, the more one would think that housing, traditionally speaking, would suffer from that. But we're just coming out of a very artificial marketplace, and I think that's what people forget about, right? So after 2008, we've had the support of the federal government in the form of buying bonds and quantitative easing and keeping interest rates artificially low. Literally, we've been in an artificial marketplace for the better part of a decade and change up until, of course, the last year or so. So what's been supporting our housing market right now is the fact that people, and I'm going to say the vast majority of homeowners who have financing, and by the way, a lot don't even have financing. A lot of houses are paid for free and clear, so they don't care what interest rates are doing. But for those that do have a mortgage, I don't know what the percentage is off the top of my head, but I know a giant percentage of people have a mortgage at least less than 4%, and a lot less than 3%. And these are not loans that are adjusting anytime soon, right? So if you live in Canada or if you live in Europe and you have a mortgage and interest rates are up, well, they're all adjustable rate mortgages in other parts of the world. What's different about the United States is interest rates are all 30-year fixed. I would say 9 out of 10 of them. I've done the math on that, right? So if you're sitting at 2.75% for a 30-year fixed, right, and you got that loan back in 2017, 18, 19, or even maybe during COVID, You also bought your home, let's say more or less around 2015, when prices were way down. Your property tax base is way low compared to what it would be if you bought today. So most homeowners are really, really sitting pretty. And I think that that's what gets lost in all of this. There's other dynamics we'll talk about as far as household creation and the issue of inventory right now. But what are your thoughts when you hear all the sensational headlines and if you go on YouTube and you look at influencers, everyone's talking about the housing crash or the inevitable housing crash.
Yeah.
How does that land for you? What are your thoughts on that? We can get into more granular detail, but I just wanted to set it up that way.
Yeah, we were talking about it a little bit yesterday, and it's my opinion that real estate is pretty local, right? So, when we started off our introduction, we talked about you being in Southern California, me being in Boise, Idaho. Those are two really different markets. And then you look at places like Austin, Texas, which is down, I think, 20% year to date in their real estate market. Inventory is going through the roof there. So I think, where you had a lot of people move to during COVID, your Boise's, your Austins, some places in Florida, those markets are struggling a little bit. Not a lot. It's not like we're seeing, like you said, the headlines where prices are crashing, but we are seeing a 10%, 15%, 20% reduction in price in some marketplaces. But the overwhelming majority of the country is staying stable or even increasing at a small percentage rate, 1-2%. Jay, I think you called me the other day with an example in Southern California, the $2 million listing that had 17 offers on it. Like, there's just no inventory in that marketplace.
Yeah, so that was an open house that we sponsored for some realtor clients of ours. I was actually at that open house at the grand opening on a Friday night, and my wife and I were walking through that open house. It was in Laguna Niguel, and you walked in the backyard, and you were surrounded by natural landscaping, natural habitat, views, a pool, an outdoor living space. It was all brand new, by the way, like the hardscape. And then you walk through the house and everything was pristine. The house was probably going to go for around $2.5 million. So we're not talking about a cheap house here, right? And that weekend, the follow-up from that real estate team was 17 offers were in so far, meaning by the end of that week, they probably would have had 30 plus offers. And it's just mind blowing, right? It's like, how can one think? And again, back to your point that real estate is local. So I understand that that's not representative of the entire country. You mentioned Austin as an example. Boise was super hot. So I think naturally with middle America states that got overly heated, there's going to be naturally a slightly higher correction that has already taken place now that rates are up. But it's still, I wouldn't consider that to be a crash. I don't know. What are your thoughts? Because it's not a crash.
Well, me either. And I think what the media fails to talk about is, Austin might be down 20%, Boise might be down 10 to 20. But if you look at the run up from 2000,
what was the increase, right?
Yeah, right. Well, what's it down from, right? It was up 500% over the past 5 years, and we're down 20. Like you alluded to, there's still so many buyers with great equity, low rates. They're not.
You're one of them, by the way.
Yeah, I bought a home in 2017 out here, and I bought a home in 2019 out here, and both, proved to be lucky timing. And even with the decline, I'm still way ahead from what I bought those properties for. So. It's just the headlines sometimes are sensationalized. They're trying to get clicks, and I think it can scare buyers from taking action when owning a home still proves to be more beneficial than renting.
Yeah, let me just show you an article. I can do screen share on here, right?
I believe so.
I think just like a quick snippet. So look at this, right? This is the latest through September 23 with forecast through September 24. Home prices nationwide. So this is nationwide in aggregate, right? This is including everything, including distressed sales increased year over year by 4.5%, right? From September 23, going all the way back to September 22. Month over month, home prices increased 0.3%. So I'm just pointing out, like, here was the current. This is what I just mentioned happened, and this is what was forecasted. Even better and significantly better by a multiple of at least 2 of what was forecast. So, I don't know. I get the concept that, with the economy slowing down and interest rates up, we should see a correction. But going back to what people are not understanding is we've got a marketplace that's supported by everyone with a 30-year fixed at 3% more or less. So what in the world? Why would anybody want to sell right now? Right? It's simple.
You bring up a good point, Jay, and to play devil's advocate a little bit, what would it take? What would it take? What would need to happen to see a large reduction in prices across the nation? Like, what could?
I have an opinion on that. Like, it's clear to me that it would have to be a massive job loss recession, right? So after 2008, that was a massive job loss recession, right? Where unemployment got to 10%, or maybe even a little bit higher than that. Bear in mind, our low in unemployment coming out of COVID was 3.4%. We're sitting at 3.9%. And the technical definition of a recession, as it comes down, as far as unemployment's concerned, is a 0.5% increase from the low. So we're actually there. So the question becomes, over the next 6, 12, 18 months, if and when a recession hits, which I think it will, is how severe is that recession, right? Because if we're going to 4.5% unemployment, even 5.5% unemployment, it's not going to be enough to break the housing market, right? Now, for whatever reason, if we have a credit event, right? And this is where I actually think there's a possibility for this. So I'm not saying there's no situation or circumstance in the next year or so where housing won't be negatively impacted. I'm not saying it can't happen. And I think, unfortunately, what would make it happen would be just absolutely terrible for everyone, because that means there's a credit event. That means the government's bailing out everyone with more money printing. That means people are losing their jobs. That means an unemployment rate of 7.5%, 8.5%, 9.5%, 10%. And that's going to be devastating for everyone, right? No one wants that.
Right.
And I have no idea truly what to expect in the next year. And I don't want to be negative, but I do think there's a possibility for something like that, given how much money we've printed as a country throughout COVID.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I only bring it up because, there's, in my experience, everybody in real estate is always positive about real estate, right? Loan officers, real estate agents, it's always the best time to buy. It's always the best time to sell. In my experience. And look, everyone's situation's different. We understand that. For some people, it makes a lot of sense, and for some people, it doesn't. And I just think it's going to serve us on this podcast to make sure that we are also looking at what would it take for the opposite to happen? What would it take for prices to come down? And I tend to agree with you. I think it's a job loss recession. But even still, because everybody has equity, they would just sell. I don't see a short sale or foreclosure wave like we saw in 2007, 2008, because people wouldn't be upside down on their properties. They would simply list it for sale, and maybe we see a small decline in prices because people need to take a little less than they were hoping for just to get out of their situation, right? So, I think it's also important reminder is that historically, outside of 2007 and 2008, real estate has done well during times of economic recession. It's been a fairly constant, steady investment. Again, outside of 07, 08, but that recession was caused by the real estate industry. It wasn't the other way around.
Yeah, I can show you a screen on that if you want. Where is it? I have way too many windows open right now. All right, we'll pass on that. But it was a graph, just because I can't find it. But it's a graph that shows going back to 1960, every single recession, and there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so we've had 9 recessions since 1960. Every single one every single one, except for one, and we all know which one that was, 2008. Real estate performed well.
Yep.
As in well, meaning real estate prices went up.
Yep.
And this is where I really want to get crystal clear on this podcast for people to understand. Like 2008, the recession was driven by housing, right? That's not going to happen this year. If the recession hits, it's not going to be because of housing. And that's what I want people to understand is in 2008, the housing crisis was caused by a credit issue in housing, right? People were getting loans when they weren't qualified to get loans. In this new marketplace, everyone had to qualify with full documentation, right? Here's my W-2s, here's my pay stubs, here's my bank statements, right? Analyzing debt to income ratio, scrutinizing credit, everything, right? It's a pain in the butt to get a loan these days. Even though we do a good job at it, most people aren't at the end of the experience saying, man, that was really fun, right? You know, it's pushing paperwork. It's having an underwriter scrutinize your ability to make your payments on time. And that's not exactly the funnest experience when they're asking you for documents ad nauseum, right? But that's what's supporting this housing market.
Yep.
In 2008, the housing market was supported by what people know as liar loans, right?
Yep. And ARMs. A lot of ARMs were sold back then. When those ARMs adjusted, everybody right now is in a 30-year fixed at, like you said, under 4%. They don't want to sell. They want to stay there for a long time.
And that brings up the other point about housing, right? This isn't just a transaction. This isn't just a financial investment. It's a home, right? You live in it. This is where you raise your family in or whatever, right? So it's got to be more than just looked at as the financial investment that it also is, but it isn't just that. You know, if you're starting a family, if you just got married, you have a baby on the way, and you've done the work because you've got jobs, you've got income, you've saved money, you've got good credit, and you can afford a payment, and you can benefit from the tax deductions that come with homeownership. This is just a personal opinion. I'm more thinking about my day-to-day experience as a husband with a family and children than I am of the financial X's and O's of whether or not this investment played out perfectly over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. Like if I didn't buy at the very perfect time in a house, but I knew I was going to be there for 10 years, for me, I'm going to buy the house if I can afford it, regardless, even in this marketplace. So that's my personal perspective. I know a lot of people really only want to focus on the financial aspect of, is this the very best time to buy a home? That's just not the way I roll. And I try to, from an educational standpoint, talk about that with my clients because I think it's important, right? They really do forget. You're still a human being. You still have a family. You still have to wake up every morning. Do you really want to be living with the landlord or at the mercy of the landlord for the next 3 years while you're in a state of paralysis by analysis on whether or not it's a good investment to buy a home right now? I don't know. Yeah,
timing the market's not a good game to play. I thought I was timing the market selling my condo in Seal Beach in 2013. I thought there's no way prices could go higher.
Yeah.
And if I own that property today, I lost a lot of money selling that early because I thought I could time the market. And it works on both sides, buying and selling. So, and I agree with your point. I've had a lot of people here in Idaho with rentals being so popular, or landlords. There's a lot of out-of-state landlords, and they end up wanting to sell the property, and then the tenant is forced to go move, and it's like that could happen every couple of years. There's just there's a sense of stability when you own your home that I think you can't put a price on. And so, I tend to agree with the comments that you had on that.
Yeah. And there's some just basic supply and demand laws at play here. We've got about 1 million homes for sale in the country. Like for perspective, back in 2008, there was over 4 million homes for sale. Let me give you a little anecdote in my marketplace right now in Orange County. Orange County has just over 2,000 active listings right now. And I just like to use 2008 as a point of reference to give you that perspective, to give listeners that perspective. So we've got 2,000 homes roughly for sale in Orange County right now. After 2008, there was about 15,000 homes for sale. I mean, we have a basic supply and demand problem. Even if inventory doubled we'd still have prices stabilized and potentially appreciating and going up. So we also have to remember it's basic supply and demand, right?
Yep. No, you're right. The supply and demand is good old economics, right?
100%, man. Cool. You want to move on to topic number 2? I think there's a product that you and I are pretty excited about that I think is super relevant for especially first-time home buyers, in my opinion, but kind of more for first-time home buyers that do have more of an investor mindset. Because some people want, a single-family home, period, and I totally understand that, and that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But I've got plenty of clients who think investment first and, home second.
Right.
You know what product I'm talking about. You want to talk about it a little bit, Matt?
Yeah, this is the 5% down investment product.
Yeah.
Fannie Mae just came out with an update. You can buy up to a 4-unit property, anywhere between 1 and 4 units with 5% down. And this would be a conventional loan with Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. And is it just Fannie Mae, Jay? It might just be Fannie Mae.
I think it's Fannie Freddie, but I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head. But just like for perspective, what changed, right?
Yep.
So specifically 3 to 4 units.
Yep.
You used to have to put down 25%.
Yep.
Even if it's a primary residence. And so just to be abundantly clear for this podcast, what we're talking about is a first-time buyer buying a multifamily property as their primary residence, okay? I'm not talking about true rental property.
So living in one of the units and renting out the other units.
Yes. So just 6 months ago, if you wanted to do that using conventional financing, even if you're moving into one of the units, you had to put 25% down on 3 to 4 units.
Yep.
That rule just changed. It's now 5%.
Crazy, yeah.
It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Yeah. And there's never been a product offering like this ever. Yeah. In the 10 years I've been doing mortgage. FHA has a version of it, but there's all sorts of strings attached, and it's difficult. Fannie Mae doesn't have the strings attached. So if I'm a first-time buyer with an investor mindset, and if I could go back in time 20 years ago and give myself, my younger self, advice, what would I be doing personally? I'd go find a 4-unit personally, because I like the idea of having 4 doors.
Yep.
And move in one of the units and rent out the other 3. And what a lot of people don't know, and this is where, we can talk. If people have interest on this topic, they want to do a deeper dive, we would obviously want you to reach out to us and have the one-on-one conversation about this. But Fannie only requires that you live in your primary residence for how long, Matt?
12 months.
12 months, right? So you're committing fraud if that's not your intention, by the way. So under no circumstances should you be doing this if you're not planning on living in the home. But as long as you live in that home for at least the first 12 months, after that, you can convert the whole thing to a rental and go do it again.
Yep.
And that's huge.
My sister did this. Now she's 30 and she owns 4 or 5 houses.
Right? It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And that's the barrier to entry is so much lower because 5% down, right? It's not 25% down.
Yes. And prior, you could do an FHA loan with 3.5% down, and that still exists also. The problem is on 3 to 4 units with FHA, you've got to meet a self-sufficiency test. Thanks, Jay. And in our experience, at least in the last 5 years, no property meets that requirement. So FHA is out the door on a 3 to 4 unit. Maybe you could use it on a 2 unit.
You can do it on 2 units because that string is not attached.
Yep. Even still, you've got massive upfront mortgage insurance, 1.75%, and it's a little bit ugly. So this new guideline change, if I was a first-time home buyer today, I would certainly be looking at this. It's massive.
Yeah, I can't emphasize this enough. I haven't had access to this in my 20-year career ever. Right.
Yep.
And again, if I could do life all over again, I would be doing this personally. Yep. I'll be telling my kids to do this. They're still young, 10 and 12, but it's huge. It really is.
Yep.
So that's the main product we wanted to highlight for today's podcast. Certainly there's going to be more down the road, but just in wrap up, I think the other thing, the questions that people have, we addressed is housing in a bubble? What's a relevant product? We just talked about it. The other question is obvious: where are interest rates headed? Right.
Yep.
Everybody wants to know that, and certainly we don't have a crystal ball, but we've been at this for a while, and we have some ideas around this. I'll let you jump in first, Matt. But I mean, I think just to tee it up, if you aren't paying that close attention, mortgage rates follow, for the most part, what the 10-year Treasury is doing. So if you're ever wondering what interest rates are doing, just look at what the 10-year Treasury is doing. Go on CNBC.com or whatever, right? 10-year Treasury just hit a pretty recent historic high, right? We haven't seen this in 20 years. The 10-year Treasury just a week or two ago was at 5%, considered very high, relatively speaking. And in the course of a week or so, it's dropped to 4.5%, which is the largest drop we've experienced in a very, very long time. So mortgage rates have improved. So that's exciting. Now they're still really elevated. We're over 7% on average for a 30-year fixed, but we were over 8% for a minute there. Now the question becomes, as we head into an election year, right, which historically speaking, if you kind of believe in the conspiracy theories, interest rates usually drop for obvious reasons.
Yep.
But there's a lot going on right now. Are we heading into recession? What inflation is going to do? And all those things impact mortgage rates. So give me your take on what you think interest rates are going to do. Like, we wake up 6 months from now, it's spring, busy season in real estate. We're getting closer to the election time. What do you think interest rates are going to do?
6 months from now, I think will be the same or lower than today. I think that the risk of being higher is there, but it's minimal. And I don't know that we're going to see a huge drop though either. So, I think maybe mortgage rates could settle down in the mid to high sixes and stay there throughout most of next year. At the same time, there's just so much uncertainty in the world, war right now in the Middle East and Ukraine, and a presidential election, as you alluded to, and possible recession on the horizon. And what does the Fed do in reaction to a possible recession? And so there's so much uncertainty. It's so difficult to tell. And my gut tells me we're the same or a little bit lower 6 months from now than we are today.
Yeah.
How about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. There's unfortunately no super clear consensus around this right now. Anybody who pretends to say they know exactly what's going to happen, run away from them, right? It's okay to have an opinion, but to have certainty around this. One thing I've noticed is there's just confusion about this, right? We don't know if recession's going to hit, and if it does, how severe it's going to be, and what role the election is going to play. I'm more of a data-driven guy, and that has to do with inflation. So going from 9.5% inflation to 3%, as we have, is huge. But we've also still seen rates stay elevated, and the reason for that is, things like what appears to be a hot economy. The third quarter GDP was at 4.9%. It's ridiculously hot. Like, what the heck happened?
Yep.
But what I think is also starting is we're at the end of that rope, where all this fiscal stimulus, Bidenomics, money printing, the CARES Act, all the trillions of dollars that in the first 2 years of Biden's term was printed and spent, is coming to an end. We've got student loan repayments starting back up again, right? That's going to take apparently on average $400 a month out of people's pockets, your average consumer. And we're talking about over $1.6 trillion in student loan debt out there. There's a few other things, right? But at the end of the day, all of the fiscal spending bills are starting to come to an end, and that's coinciding with peak interest rates and higher for longer. So in my opinion, going from that 3.5% inflation back down to 2% is probably going to be happening sooner than we think in the next 6 to 9 months, in my opinion. I could be wrong on that, but that's just my opinion. So that's also going to be manifesting around spring to summer of next year with what is inevitably a recession in the election season. So I wouldn't be surprised to see interest rates in the 5.5% to 6.5% range. I just don't think we're going to see anything lower than that, right? Because we're not returning to an artificial market supported by money printing and quantitative easing. right? The Fed's not going to be doing that anymore. In fact, they're doing the opposite,
Yep.
quantitative tightening. So it's my opinion that we are going to see lower rates, whether it's like you said, high 6 to mid 6 or 6 to 5.5. I don't know, but I do think interest rates finally do settle down a bit, given everything that's going on.
Yeah, there's a couple things that come up for me around that. Like if I'm a buyer, do I wait for rates to come down a little bit? I mean, I know how I feel about it, and my thought process is no. If you can afford the payment today, get in the home. There's so much less competition in a lot of parts of the country. I'm seeing some massive seller credits, price reductions. You're not up against 10 or 15 offers in most markets outside of Southern California, and you can get in the home. And then if rates happen to go higher for some reason, you're locked into today's rates. And if they go lower, you refinance and you capture the lower rate. So I'm more payment focused, and I attempt to see my clients, attempt to get my clients to see what is the payment comfortable. If you're pushing yourself and it's uncomfortable, don't buy right now. But if it's a comfortable payment, or you have to push yourself a little bit, sometimes we have to take a little bit of risk in life, right? Maybe you're pushing yourself a little bit, get in the home and get the seller credits and get the discount in a lot of marketplaces. And when rates come down, you'd be able to capture the lower rate and reduce your monthly payments. So that's my thought process on it. But I wouldn't want people to hear our forecast and think, oh wow, rates are coming down, I'll just wait. The amount of buyers on the sideline right now that we talk to on a daily basis that say, hey, you're approved, you could buy a home today, and they just say I'm going to wait because the payment's too high. There's a ton of people on the sideline, and the second rates come down, they're going to be out shopping, and there's going to be more demand for homes, of which we have and will continue to have a very limited supply. So
yeah, that's the great reminder, right? Supply is going to be a problem indefinitely, right? Yeah. The builders aren't building anywhere nearly enough, and the household creation right now, where millennials are hitting peak home buying age, is through the roof, right? It's just basic supply and demand. So when you understand that, it kind of takes some of the confusion and fear out of executing on buying a home. This concept of not overbuying, but also not playing small, right? It's kind of hard, but that's where you have to rely upon somebody like myself or somebody like Matt, who are true advisors, right? You do want to avoid the the salesperson loan officer who is just kind of forcing the issue and trying to get you to buy a home no matter what. Like, the idea is to find a trusted advisor in the mortgage space that can slow down and really look at this with you. I just remember the first time that my wife and I bought, I was terrified because I was going from $1,700 a month to $3,600 a month. And I was absolutely terrified, right? When my realtor called to say our offer was accepted, like, my whole body went numb and I was freaking out of fear. Right. It wasn't like, oh, I'm so excited. I'm like, oh my God, what have I done?
Yeah.
But on the other end of that, I'm so glad I did it. Right. So that's where it's a little bit of a balance and dance, where an advisor like us really does need to nudge somebody in the right direction, because the fear can take over. But our goal is to get you to the other side where you haven't overextended yourself, but you push yourself into a home that you can see yourself living in for the next 10 years and enjoy life in, right?
Yeah, I've got a couple points to that, and we can wrap it up. I mean, buying a home, literally, I was nervous too. I was a financial advisor. My income was going to be declining, and then it was going to switch to commission only. So it was a big risk. I wasn't guaranteed a salary for more than a year or two. And it single-handedly changed my life. Like, got me out of debt, allowed me to take a risk in the mortgage business, which has completely changed my life. And to your point on working with a true advisor, in this marketplace, unfortunately, for those that don't know, the mortgage business and real estate in general has probably been the one to feel the effects of the economy before anyone else. I mean, the mortgage business, for all intents and purposes, is in a depression. And it's the worst it's been in a long time, decades. And so what you get with that is you get a lot of loan officers or salespeople that need to close a deal to feed their family.
Yeah.
And so you get bad advice, you get the pushiness, you get the salesiness, And the risk is that you're not working with somebody who isn't desperate for every last deal and can truly advise you on what's best. And there's a lot of advisors like us too. I wouldn't want to make it sound like we're the only ones out there, but just be careful. There's a lot of people right now who just need to close a loan, and you could get some bad advice pretty easily.
Yeah, it's really important who you hire. And I agree with you. There are a lot of good human beings in our industry who are truly experts and good advisors in their field, but the opposite is also true. There's plenty of bad actors. So you just got to be mindful of that.
Yep, absolutely.
That's what we have for you guys today. More to come. Thanks for tuning in, and we appreciate you listening.
Thank you.
All right, Matt. See you, bud.
Bye.